thanking, as a white person in this room, by thanking the people of color who have spoken and shared your truth, as Mr. Robinson said. I think that's really important when we're having discussions about something like this. As a white person who's committed to anti-racism, a lot of my training comes from the People's Institute for Survival and Beyond, and one of their core trainers, a woman by the name of Dina Hayes, said something to me that's always stuck with me, which is it's important for us to understand these issues in our head. And I think this is a great resource for that, and a lot of the presentations we've heard tonight have been fantastic. They've given us a lot of information for us to think about. But if we can't move from our heads to our hearts, then we can never move from our hearts to our feet. And if we don't move to our feet, we can't go out there and do the work that needs to be done. And I think that's what Chapter 6 is about in the New Jim Crow. It's what do we do then? If we've accepted all of these truths, if we understand what's going on, what do we do? An important part about of that work for me is telling our stories, particularly as a white person, because I don't experience this. This will never affect me in the same way as it will a person of color. I grew up in the 80s as well. I grew up in the 80s in Inwood, in northern Manhattan, one of the poorest neighborhoods, one of the neighborhoods that was affected deeply by the crack epidemic in the 1980s and the bankruptcy of New York City. And this was still not my experience because I was a white person going through that. And so I have this quote up on the screen here, and I was going to do an activity, but I'll just, I'll walk you through my experience with this, and you can all read it. I don't see race, I see a human being.
Yes, yes.
Also growing up as a white person in New York City in the 1980s, and probably many of the people of color in this room who grew up at that time, this is how I was taught. This was the solution to racism. This was the solution to disproportionality. If I don't see you as a black person, I just see you as a fellow human being, then we can get past all of that history that has started, and we can finally work towards fixing what needs to be fixed. But as many people here have explained, colorblindness is a myth, right? And in fact, it's not just a myth, it's a really effective tool to perpetuate institutional racism. It's the most effective thing that we've ever come up with as white folks to sort of abandon our responsibility in this whole system, right? If I just see you as a human being, then I don't have to see your race. And more importantly, I don't have to admit that I have a race as a white person, and that my race provides benefits to me at the expense of all of the people who are being incarcerated and who are being killed by institutional racism, right? And so I think it's really important, if we are going to commit to the next step, as Mr. Brown has so importantly reminded us that we need to, right? That we have to talk about some of this stuff, right? For me, there are certain obstacles. One of them is this idea of colorblindness. Michelle Alexander talks about in the last chapter some others. One is the myth of the meritocracy that Anwar, Mr. Robinson just talked about. That, well, if we have all of these examples of people of color who have made it, then why can't just all of the other people of color pull themselves up by their bootstraps too? There's an author who writes for Jezebel. Her name is Lindy West. She had an article where she talked about the article was about hipster racism and that new phenomenon. It's a fantastic article. I really, really suggest that you take a look at it. But she says, if you believe that all men are created equal, I'm going to paraphrase her here, if you really believe all men are created equal, and you acknowledge that there are disproportionalities in the way that the criminal justice system is locking people up, or that health outcomes for people of color are disproportionately negative, then you have to admit that there is some outside force affecting that. And maybe that force is institutional racism. And if you don't believe that all people are created equal, then you're a racist. So, that's the choice I think we have to make, particularly as white folks. Are we really going to admit that something else is at work here, and what is our role in it? And then most importantly, as Michelle Alexander says in the book, what do we get out from combating that as white folks? Because we can't undo this unless this is a multiracial effort, and it's one that is grounded in taking back what was stolen from all of us. Because I don't want to be that raggedy-ass human being that's locking up other people and putting them in a cage. I don't. You know what? But I am not Mike Brown, right? I am the cop who's holding the gun. And for whatever reason, choices that I made, choices my parents made, I haven't found myself in that situation as a white person, and I thank God for that. But that could be my reality. So until we start having that conversation and realize that we all have something to restore in terms of our humanity and fighting this, that's when we're going to move forward. I'm going to end it there. I want to thank everybody for your attention. I'm going to pass it over to all of you to close
And I think, we did, because we didn't start till 20 after, so it wasn't, we actually were on time, and that was a lot to take in, but maybe we can have maybe 2 questions or 1 question while we have Jazz here, because I think, hearing from, again, the experiences that people have gone through as the new Jim Crow and the systems, maybe if we have time for 1 question, we might not. People might just want to mingle, have a drink, and go.
I just want to say one thing, to follow up on, I don't see race, I see a human being. If those of y'all that have been watching the